a threat to veto the VA budget bill, and a nomination for the first woman to serve as a member of the Joint Chiefs. Today, July 25th, 2023. Good morning, early birds. I'm Jonathan Lehrfeld, and this is the Early Bird Brief, produced by Defense News and Military Times. First up, White House officials threaten to veto House Republicans' plan for funding Veterans Affairs programs next fiscal year. The officials said the appropriations outline contains too many partisan attacks on controversial social issues. The $320 billion spending plan roughly matches funding levels requested by President Joe Biden. House lawmakers are expected to vote on it this week. But administration officials said amendments lawmakers added onto the plan have made the proposal unacceptable. Some measures added to the bill would repeal expanded abortion access for vets and eligible family members. The VA would only be allowed to provide those services in cases of rape, incest, and imminent danger to the life of the patient. The bill would also eliminate a wide range of healthcare services for transgender veterans, and it would bar VA officials from flying LGBT pride flags at any department facility. Here's why it matters. The Veterans Affairs budget is typically less controversial than most appropriations fights on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers have provided significant annual spending increases to the department since 2000. The plan for fiscal year 2024 includes a 6% boost over last year's funding levels for the department. But Democratic lawmakers opposed the measure because of the additional amendments on social issues. Republican lawmakers said the moves are to depoliticize the department. The budget bill is expected to pass later this week, even after the president's veto threat. But Democrats hold the majority in the Senate. Lawmakers there have already expressed concerns about the controversial provisions in the House version of the bill. That could mean a lengthy negotiation between the two chambers on the final budget plan for VA. Both the House and Senate are scheduled for a recess at the end of this week. They'll return in early September, only a few weeks before the deadline to pass a federal budget deal. Another important story, we have an update for you on the situation involving the Army soldier who crossed the border into North Korea last week. The United Nations command in charge of guarding the demilitarized zone said it has started a conversation with North Korea about Private Travis King. Lieutenant General Andrew Harrison is a British officer who is the deputy commander of United Nations Command. At a briefing in Seoul, South Korea, he said he does not really want to talk about the details of the communications. The contact happened through mechanisms set up under the armistice. That could refer to the so-called pink phone line between the command and the North Korean People's Army at the border truce village of Panmunjom. North Korea has remained publicly silent about King, who was supposed to be heading to Fort Bliss, Texas, after his release from prison in South Korea on an assault conviction. U.S. officials have expressed concern about his well-being and said previously that North Korea ignored requests for information about him. King's crossing came at a time of high tensions in the Korean Peninsula. The United States and North Korea have been engaged in a tit-for-tat cycle of U.S. military exercises and the North's testing of missiles. In other news, we're continuing to highlight the Military Times Foundation Service Members of the Year. Here's the 2023 Marine of the Year.
When I was about 7 years old, my mom and dad took me to the USS Lexington in Corpus Christi, Texas, which was the first time I met a United States Marine. And I was like, I want to be that guy. I knew that's what I wanted to do. What it means to be a United States Marine to me is really the tradition, the honor that we have as Marines. My name is Master Sergeant Kevin Hanschild. I'm a United States Marine Air Traffic Controller. One of the things I really love about being an air traffic controller is we get to work up in the tower and you get to look out 360-degree views. Some pretty amazing things depending on where you're at. Across the board, no matter the branch of service you're in, our job is to effectively provide safe, orderly, and expeditious flow of air traffic. You're constantly paying attention, making sure there's no obstructions in the runways, no vehicles, no aircraft. You always have to be ready. You always have to be trained. You always have to be prepared, which is something that we hold in high regard within the Marine Corps. On 15 August, we woke up normal morning. We got the call from our colonel. They had evacuated the tower. The Taliban was moving into the city. As soon as we got down there, it was chaos. There was aircraft everywhere, taking off, and just sheer panic. There was an Afghan Air Force Cessna that had aborted takeoff, and we watched them roll and just stopped right in the middle of the runway. Our initial thoughts were, okay, they know where we are, and that aircraft has rockets in it, so this is it. And then all of the pilots and aircrew get out of the aircraft and run back to the hangars. So that ceased all operations whenever you have an obstruction like that on the runway. We had aircraft stacked up in the pattern. C-17s were trying to land. We just realized we had to move the obstruction. We had to get it off the runway. So myself and Gunnery Sergeant Jose Mendez and two special forces, we jumped in the back of a pickup and then we drove out there, made sure we checked everything around just to make sure there was, no bombs, no munitions. As we started towing the aircraft off, the civilian controllers had notified me that they left all the radio equipment in the tower that they evacuated. Without the radio equipment, they would not be able to effectively communicate with any aircraft frequencies. And we were looking for an Afghan controller as well as that equipment. He was supposed to have that equipment in hand. Once we got there, there was anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 people around the airport.
The chaos in Afghanistan as thousands crowded onto the tarmac in a desperate attempt to get away from the Taliban.
Kind of navigated through finding this one Afghan controller with the equipment in hand. We got him in the truck with us, and we started to come back to coalition sides when our vehicle got struck. As soon as the round started impacting the truck, I immediately jumped on top of the Afghan that we had in there. He didn't have any body armor protection or anything like that, and I did. So I figured once the bullets started impacting the vehicle, if one got through, I'm more protected than he is. Once the machine gun fire kind of slowed down a little bit, the truck then proceeded just to drive past Abbey Gate. We cleared a few checkpoints and then finally, within about an hour, made it back to the north side of the airport. So I'm grateful that we were able to help a lot of those Afghan citizens evacuate to safety. That's the whole reason we were there. So it's very humbling to know that we were a part of something like that. I'm very proud. And it really is, it's due to the team that I had out there. To any Marines that come, in the future, make sure you know your job. Be successful at it. Never stop training because you never know. You always have to be ready at any time.
Also on the radar for today, in case you missed it, President Joe Biden on Friday nominated Admiral Lisa Franchetti to serve as the next chief of naval operations. Here's why it matters. If confirmed by the Senate, Franchetti would be the first woman to lead the Navy or any Defense Department military service. The Coast Guard was the first U.S. armed service to be led by a female. Admiral Linda Fagan became the 27th Commandant of the branch last year. During a celebration of Women's History Month in March, Franchetti and other female force stars discussed changes for women in the services.
I know when I came in the Navy in 1985, a lot of the doors for women were closed. I could not even have imagined being the commanding officer of a warship, a carrier strike group, a fleet, or the vice chief of naval operations. But pretty soon after I got in the Navy, it started to change. We had the opportunity in 1993, when the combat exclusion law was repealed, for women to serve on combatants at sea or fly combatant aircraft. And so I knew that the doors were starting to open.
Franchetti commissioned as a Navy officer in 1985. She became the second woman to serve as Vice Chief of Naval Operations in September 2022. Retired Vice Admiral Nora Tyson, who in 2010 became the first woman to command a carrier strike group, said Franchetti's resume makes her an ideal candidate to serve as the next Chief of Naval Operations, regardless of gender. Franchetti is likely to face a confirmation hearing before the Senate later this fall. But her nomination is likely to be sidelined by ongoing political fights on Capitol Hill over the military's abortion access policy. Biden also announced the nomination of Admiral Samuel Paparo as commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. In recent weeks, he had been rumored to be in line for the CNO post. And now, here are some other stories that we're hearing chirps about. The Prime Minister of Cambodia, one of Asia's longest-serving leaders, says he's ready to hand the premiership to his oldest son, who is a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and heads the country's army. South Korea's military said North Korea fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into its eastern sea. That adds to a recent streak in weapons testing that is apparently in protest of the U.S. sending major naval assets to South Korea in a show of force. Also, in case you missed it, the Air Force said Friday that some airmen can resume the process of moving to their next duty station after a funding shortfall briefly threatened to derail the service's busy summer travel season. And Iran kicked off an Air Force drill over the weekend as the U.S. sends more fighter planes to the region. And on this day in history, in 1898, U.S. forces launched their invasion of Puerto Rico during the Spanish-American War. After the Treaty of Paris was signed, ending the war, the island was ceded to the United States. That's it for us this morning. To get more of the top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. Please give us a like, rating, and a comment wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media @defense_news and @Military Times. The Early Bird Brief is hosted by me, Jonathan Lehrfeld, and produced by Simone Z. Perez. Today's episode features stories by Leo Shane III, Megan Eckstein, Jeff Zuzulowitz, and the Associated Press. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Gruss. Have a great day.